All right, we are back on Morning Line. Hopefully have our Zoom snafu fixed. And Jim Schmitz is joining us. He's a downtown resident. As we're talking about the proliferation of the transportainment industry in downtown Nashville. He's also part of Safe Fun Nashville, looking at ways to reform the fact that we have so many of these crazy vehicles on the road. It's becoming kind of a problem downtown. Jim, when we lost your signal before, I just asked you the two questions. What do you see with regard to regulations? You like the idea of maybe having zones where they're limited to where they can travel? Maybe also putting a cap on the number of licenses given out for these types of vehicles?
I mean, I think those are certainly things to talk about. What I'm trying to advocate is that we try to take a common sense approach, and that we do it also in more of a collaborative way, so that we're not coming in just with a heavy hand and saying we need to do this, we need to do this. I mean, I want to respect the fact that these are small businesses who may have had some challenges along the way, and they are attractive to our visitors, but just trying to find some place where we find a balance. And if that includes some limitations on where they go, if it includes some noise regulation, if it includes some limitation on the number of them, all those things I think should be on the table. There are other issues, I think, as well, as much as the size. If you notice this is a big safety issue in my mind, is with First and Second Avenue pretty much between Broadway and Church Streets closed, that's moved a lot of these vehicles onto Third Avenue and a lot of other traffic as well. Emergency vehicles, that's a main thoroughfare for emergency vehicles. It makes it very difficult for the emergency vehicles, for instance, to get out to Germantown in a quick manner because of the congestion on Third. So there are a lot of things in this that need to be considered in my mind.
Yeah, I think it's come to that point. You mentioned it earlier when we talked about the Nashville Chamber, the Downtown Partnership, the Convention and Visitors Bureau, sending the letter to the commission that's going to look at these license requests later today, asking that they be denied. And I think Butch Spearden quoted here in the Tennessean, the proliferation of slow-moving vehicles and carriages in addition to other forms of entertainment transportation vehicles outside of your authority has overwhelmed downtown and created undesirable, untenable conditions for safety, traffic congestion, and noise. And it's interesting, you live downtown, so I understand where you're coming from. These individuals and these organizations, as you know, are nothing if not pro-business and pro-economy, and yet here they are, and I agree with you, these are small businesses and we need to find a way to work with them, but they're calling this out themselves, and it's not often you see all of them in agreement on taking steps to limit business. So that's got to give an indication of just how bad things have gotten, don't you think?
Well, yes, because there's also the issue of there are businesses downtown too, trying to conduct business during the week. And I can't tell you how many times I've been in a meeting at a different, office here in town, and as my wife likes to call them, the woohoo wagons come by playing their music loudly and screaming and whatever outside. You're just like, okay, stop the meeting for a second while this drives by. So yeah, it impedes, then it's impeding on other businesses. But I think one of the great concerns is if another incident, unfortunate like we had a few weeks ago with a young man fell off and was run over, if we have more of those, then we get a bad name in the tourism business. Then things are out of hand. And then we go from a fun party to a dangerous party. And, what happens to our tourism at that point?
Gotcha. Listen, we've got a couple phone calls I want to take as we continue our discussion here. Let's go first to Ann. Ann, good morning. Hi, Ann.
Good morning. I live on a small residential street in East Nashville, accessible only by Gallatin Road, Ellington Parkway, Douglas. And this summer, I was shocked, frankly, when I saw the first one of these pedal cars come down my small little 3-block street with drunken women on it with a bridesmaid, I'm assuming, or bachelor party on it. This happened more than 10 times over this summer, where one of these vehicles from downtown came down in and around this little neighborhood this summer. Are these vehicles, pedal cars, the ones that you can do the pedaling and or sit on top of, the party cars or buses, are they not restricted on where they can go? This is a small residential neighborhood, and these were coming from downtown Nashville. They not only had to travel down busy roads to get to this area, they drove through at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on where families were out walking, where no sidewalks were. They came down at 10 o'clock at night when families were sleeping, and we already deal with woohoo trains, but now we have party cars coming through that make the train sound quiet. And frankly, my neighbors and I were just floored that they were allowed to travel outside the downtown district.
Jim, you want to talk about that? I mean, I guess they're doing that because it's gotten so congested downtown. They're trying to find an area where they can drive without getting gridlock.
Well, just imagine what it's going to be like if these licenses today, for some reason, are approved. That would be, another 32 put on the street?
Right.
You're right. They got to find a place to go. It's clearly out of hand when they're going over into East Nashville. And I've heard stories of them going down into 12 South, but there are no regulations that I'm aware of on that. As far as I know, the pedal taverns the city does have some jurisdiction over them. The buses and the tractors that are pulling wagons, that is a state jurisdiction. And we actually need to have, frankly, we need to have some state legislators step up and put some things on the books to allow local municipalities to manage these vehicles.
Yeah, you're right. I'm glad you mentioned that. People are wondering, well, what do you mean by this? You can't regulate it. Now, state law prevents cities from regulating these vehicles, the buses and such, with 14 or more passengers. They can regulate some of the smaller pedal-powered vehicles as well. And I guess some of the state lawmakers have heard from folks like you and others, and they're going to consider maybe modifying this to allow states to further regulate it. Because she's right. Look. It's good fun, and thank goodness they're not driving, but the ones I witness have a bunch of obnoxious drunks in the back, okay? And going through a little neighborhood that's residential ain't cutting it. And I'll tell you where the violation is on that, okay? You may not be able to regulate the vehicle because it's a public road, but there's something called disturbing the peace and creating loud noise in neighborhoods. There's ordinances that prevent that, I mean, maybe someone needs to crack down in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, there is, to my knowledge, there is no enforcement of those noise ordinances, and that's a problem. But look, the police are stretched; they've got a lot of other things on their. But that's something else that needs to be looked at, and look, if I were in the shoes of the owners of these vehicles, the ones that are running, I would be looking at a way to collectively find some self-regulation. It's, my experience is it's usually better to do these kinds of things for yourself before somebody imposes them upon you. And, there may be some out there that are actually trying to do some things to keep their vehicles safer. They ought to be standing up and cheering this on to get their compatriots to do the same.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. And I wonder, I mean, we don't have a representative available to us from one of these organizations to talk about this today. I'm sure they'll be there at that meeting this afternoon. But do you have any indication yourself? Have you heard from any of them that they recognize that this is kind of a golden goose for them? I mean, I'm sure it's successful. I'm sure they're making good money because they're very busy. But if they don't self-regulate, they're gonna kill themselves. Because if they don't do it, someone else is going to do it, and it's going to shut them down.
I actually have had one of the owners reach out, and we're trying to put together a time for us to get together and talk a little bit about this and see if there are some common sense ways we can work together on.
It's just interesting. I was thinking in some ways, and I'm not even sure where it stands right now. I don't know how you felt about it, but it's gotten to the point. Remember initially when those scooters showed up in town a couple of years ago, you know, little scooters, electric ones all around, and there were a zillion all of a sudden, and then it kind of went away, and now you see some here and there. I don't know, that kind of reminds me of that, and there was a point there, of course, and those things can be really dangerous if they're used irresponsibly, where didn't the council step in a bit on that and say, look, enough of these for a while, and it seemed like they backed it off for a bit and they disappeared a bit. I don't know if that's an apt comparison in any way of maybe where they're going with this.
It could be. I mean, what happened there was, yeah, they got out of control. There were too many dumped onto the streets of downtown Nashville. The Metro stepped back and said, wait, we're halting all of these. No more. We're going to take and do an RFP, and we're going to select 3 providers, and that's it. Mm-hmm. And now that's what you have. You have 3 providers of those scooters downtown. Now, don't get me started on that issue, because it's amazing how many people can't read. It clearly states on the scooter, do not ride on the sidewalk.
Yep.
And I challenge you to find scooters that aren't riding on the sidewalks. I mean, but that's a whole different.
Yeah.
That's a whole different kettle of fish, as my mother used to say, and I'm not going there.
I'm with you on that. I'm with you. Let's take another call or two. We'll go next to Dan. Dan, good morning. Hi, Dan.
Good morning.
Good morning.
These shows always make me laugh a little bit because, you know, I live in what used to be a rural area, and I work downtown right in the heart of heavy traffic. And these party buses or whatever they are, you make a choice. I live in a rural area. I got to give things up, okay? My computer doesn't work that great. There are other things that don't work that great, but I love the rural lifestyle. So I give up broadband or better broadband than what I would get downtown. Downtown, they got the party buses. They are cash cows. You make the choice to live down there. With that, you can't have your cake and eat it too. There's going to be things down there that are going to be there to stay in a tourist industry town, and they're going to get that revenue whatever way they can. You have a traffic issue downtown. I get stuck in it all the time. And it's really not because of any of the party buses. It's other things that aren't enforced. Slow left lane drivers, people looking at their texts, people on their cell phone. There's a whole lot of stuff that I know that the party buses can't be blamed for everything. I disagree with the scooters also. I was walking downtown and it was just really inappropriate. But why not? It's not enforced. But I know that I have to give certain things up, given where I live. You want to live downtown in one of the major cities in the United States, Nashville, Tennessee, you're going to have to put up with some of this stuff, period. And you can't blame it on anything. Nobody cares about their safety. I mean, you can't come on in at all these different angles to try to get this thing stopped. Well, I can't get in this way, so let's talk about safety. Nobody really cares. Let's talk about traffic. Emergency vehicles can't get through. Baloney. There's a whole lot of other stuff you can control.
Dan, point taken. I mean, I see the point he's making there. What would your response be? Because, yeah, I mean, a lot of those points make sense. I see where he's coming from, but it's gotten much worse. So there's got to be a limit at some point. But what do you think of what he says there? I mean, you choose to live downtown. This is a headache for you, and there could be nothing to stop you from potentially moving out of ways the way he did, because it's a sacrifice, a balancing act.
No, I totally get that. I understand, and part of what my you know, is that on my personal side, on my personal concern is, yeah, I chose to move downtown, but when I chose to move downtown, this wasn't going on. This wasn't a part of it. Yeah. I bargained for something, but I didn't bargain for this. So that's the answer to that portion of it. You know, whenever anything gets out of hand or out of control, you've got to take into account and adjust for balance. And we talk about downtown Nashville being a great place to live, work, play, and invest. And it just seems we're out of balance. We're really good on the play. We're really good on the invest. But as far as a place for people to work and a place for people to live, we need to get that back into balance. And that's aside from the whole safety issue. And I totally disagree with him that nobody cares about safety. I think it was shocking to people what happened to the young man who fell off and got run over. We never did hear. I haven't heard what the final. I hope he's recovered. But, you know, and I also have a feeling that that's not the first time that's happened. That just happens to be one that we know about. Would love to know from some Vanderbilt emergency room doctors, has there been more of this? But to say we don't care about safety, that's just dead wrong. If there are people getting injured in those, that puts a bad name and a black eye on the tourism for Nashville, which brings in, if you take a look at the sales tax revenue that's brought in for the state of Tennessee and for Metro Nashville, it's staggering. The amount that comes from downtown. And if people stop going to the hotels, they stop going to the bars because of safety issues on moving vehicles, that hits a lot of people, and we don't want that to happen.
Gotcha. Again, like I said, I thought Dan made some interesting points, and I think most people do agree that safety is something we care about. But the other point is, hey, Dan, we hear you talking, and it's a business and it's downtown. But as I said earlier, you've got the Nashville Area Chamber, you have the Nashville Convention Visitors Bureau, you've got the Downtown Partnership, all which are very much pro-business and the like, saying what we see here is getting out of hand, kind of echoing what Jim has said. And for them to even come out and say something like this and try to play limit on a business tells you that it's gone too far. And I think we all would agree anything, no matter where you're at, downtown in a city or out in a rural area, things can get too much and need to be addressed through some regs. Let's take a break. When we come back, more of the phone calls. If you're on hold, stay there, and we'll continue our conversation with Jim Schmitz, who's with Safe Fun Nashville, talking about these transportainment and whether limits need to be in place right after this.